Okay, so now that you've done the first eyebrow, now we get into the complicated part. Because now we need to duplicate that eyebrow on the other side of the face. Now you can just freehand it and draft it and then tweak it as you go, but I'll show you a few tips and tricks that I like to take into consideration. I like to definitely use measurements of the face and use the facial positioning of the previous brow, the brow that you've already drawn, to help find the positioning of that second eyebrow. The first set of references are the ones coming from the shaping sticker, so you can use that shaping sticker to really show you where you need to start. So you have the middle of the face marked down on the shaping sticker, and you have measurements coming out of there. So as you see there on the point B of that shaping sticker, that's where my line of the arch, that's where my top line of the body of my brow stops and becomes a curve. I want to take that measurement to the other side of the face. The second one would be the tail, and on the shaping sticker you can't really see here, but it's sat somewhere around C, so I want to make sure I take that measurement and I place it on the other side as well. A couple other references would be where your arch sits in reference to the shaping sticker. So again, I'm going to base off the shaping sticker mostly. That's why I want to make sure that it's placed as straight as possible on the face. So one of the main ones is going to be my arch, which is the highest point of my brow. And then the bottom one is going to be the tail. They say for the ideal brow shape, your tail and the bottom line at the beginning of your brow there should begin at the same height in the face. So if you can see that white line going through the face, you can see that the brow at the bottom there begins at the bulb of the brow. It begins at the same line where the tail ends. And that's what some people might call a balanced or perfect brow. Again, this doesn't apply for everybody, but it's a good reference point to have in mind. And now there's the measurements and the placement. So what are things that we can control and how to transfer them neatly? So your brow dimensions. So my brow dimensions are going to be the size of my brow, basically. So I'm going to measure this with a caliper as a second reference point to the sticker. I don't want to rely just on the sticker, even though the sticker is more than accurate. This is an extra step you can take if you want to make sure that that brow is as symmetric as possible to the previous one. So I measure these all from the middle of the face to the arch, and from the middle of the face to the tail. I see what that measurement is, and I transfer it to the other side. Another important measurement here is going to be the thickness at the bulb of the brow. So how thick is my brow there? And you can see you can base off of that sticker. You see there's lines coming down the middle of that sticker. You can transfer that very easily. Let's say if your brow begins at one little blue line, then you would just on the other side of the face, on that blue line, begin your second eyebrow, for example. Now, the drafting of the second eyebrow takes a little more patience and a little more time, so make sure you're patient, check back for comparison, and don't freak out. This is a lot simpler than it looks, and I know just showing you all those measurements probably scared you a little bit, but don't worry, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. So first we're going to start with the tail point. So you can see here that I have the tail point marked with a yellow star. We're going to try and copy that point to the other side. Actually here her brow ended somewhere around that 7 number mark. You can see it there. And now you just turn the face and you mark it with a line going downwards on the face on that same spot. So that's going to be one of your first reference points, and that's going to help you with your brow dimensions. So now you know where your brow should end. So now I'm going to try and find the arch, and usually my arch line, I will define this as where does exactly my top body line change. So your top body line is coming completely straight. Where does it start curving? That's where I'll mark my arch line. So I'll find it as somewhere around B on her right brow, and now I'm going to mark it on her left brow, just so I have that reference point. Now my next point is going to be how thick are my brows at the beginning or at the bulb there, right? So I can see they're there in my shaping sticker. Again, the shaping sticker makes life so much easier, but you could do this with a caliper if you wanted to. So I just want to match that on the other side. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. I can see that the beginning of the brow is somewhere around one of those little black lines there. I'm going to copy that on her left brow. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the top of the brow. So now we're going to play connected dots where you're using the points to mimic the first eyebrow. So we're basically just connecting the spots that we've drawn for reference now. The one that I didn't get into here was the arch low point, or the thickness of my arch, or the thickness of my eyebrow at the arch. And that one's really important because it'll help you connect those reference points a little bit better. So now here you're gonna see I'm just gonna do very straight lines going upwards at the top of the brow. And then one line moving downwards for the tail. And then I'm going to do the same at the bottom. So just going to connect those dots and try to mimic that first eyebrow. Now, before I measure symmetry, what I'm going to do usually is I'm going to fill that in and make it look nice and smooth. And I might even apply concealer before I move on to any other step. And the reason for that, here I'm going to show you also, I'll clean up the eyebrow a little bit with, I'll wrap some baby wipe around my shaping crayon that's already in a very, very flat, sharp surface. And I'll use that to help me clean up around the brow. So now I'm going to clean up all those extra lines. And then I'm gonna groom that second brow. So you can see now that the brows don't look very symmetrical. That's okay. You can tell right now that the brow on the right side is a bit higher. The arch can come down a little bit. The tail might be a little bit off, but that's okay. I'm gonna finish that brow and then I'll measure for symmetry and do any corrections if I need to. So I'm gonna groom that brow at the top and at the bottom, pushing that shaping crayon with my barber blade. If you are using a barber blade, make sure to be very, very gentle at the bottom of the brow. The top of the brow is not as difficult to work with, but sometimes working at the bottom of the brow with a barber blade can create accidents fairly quickly, so make sure you're very, very careful here. Once I cleaned up that second brow, now I'm going to apply concealer and see the final result. If I'm happy with the final result, then I might not need any tweaking, but you definitely want to make sure that you clean up that brow as much as possible before you judge it against the other one. Like I said, the concealer adds a little bit of contrast and defines the shape of the brow quite a bit. So sometimes if you start judging your brow before it's done, you won't really get to see the finished result before you're done. So now we're gonna remove the sticker and check for symmetry. I am gonna recheck for symmetry. So I'm gonna remove that shaping sticker. I'm gonna make sure that I like my brows. I'm gonna use that barber blade to clean up at the beginning of my brows. I wanna remove any unwanted hairs that can get in my way and that will get in the way of me helping see if those brows are nice and symmetrical. Now, this is the exact same brow. I didn't do any tweaking off camera. All I really did was use a concealer, and you can tell the shape has already improved very dramatically just by using the concealer and cleaning up around the edges and just being patient. Now, another trick that I like to use is I'll grab either a makeup sponge or my concealer brush, and I'll draw a line, kind of like a unibrow line, just to make sure that the beginning of those brows is symmetrical. Now, this is not to say that I haven't made sure my brows are symmetrical, but sometimes something as little as a millimeter can make the brows look off, especially when you're doing ombre or when you're doing microshading. You want to make sure that the beginning of the brows is perfect and they both measure up to be the exact same. So I'll draw a line across the face with some concealer. Now you can see after drawing that line, the brows are starting to look a lot more symmetrical and a lot better. I'm going to draw that top line there. And I know this looks a little bit weird and you obviously might not want to show your client this part, but to me, it really helps, especially with the beginning of the brow. This is one of those untold tricks. It helps you get perfect shaping every time, especially at the beginning of the brows. If you haven't noticed any mistakes you made probably in the placement of your brow, this would really show you and give you some clarity as to where your eyebrows start. If you find an eyebrow starting half a centimeter higher than the other one, then you know your entire eyebrow needs to come down. If the eyebrows are somewhat closer and you're just doing a little correction with this step, then you know you're doing things right. The next trick that I'm going to show you is you're going to carry on those concealer lines all the way around the brow. You're going to bring in that concealer all the way throughout the top of both brows, and that'll help you gain a bit more clarity on the shape of the brows, the symmetry, and the flow of them. If you apply concealer all the way throughout, it'll really create a contrast between the brows. They'll really stick out compared to the rest of the skin, and you'll be able to see if there are any tweaks that you need to make. So I'll use either a concealer brush or a makeup sponge, and I'll make sure to bring in that concealer all the way throughout my brows. Now this is when you can go back and check for symmetry. If you want, you can use your caliper and measure both brows. I find once you've used the shaping sticker, you don't really need to repeat this process, as it might just stir you around more than it will help you. But now one last step that I like to do here, and I'll do this for ombre and for microshading, is to make sure that I measure what are my areas going to be, where are they going to be, and then make sure that I note them down on both eyebrows. So I will measure on both brows where I want my shaded area to be, where I want my combination area to be, or where I want my ombre area to be, just where I want everything to finish, and then just to make sure that those brows are going to be symmetrical when it comes to technique placement. You don't want to have an eyebrow that has too much shading on one side or too much microblading on one side, or that those gaps are starting to look a little strange. So I make sure to measure and note those measurements down right on my client's face, especially before the treatment, so I know where my outline is going to be and where my shading is going to be. But for microshading in particular, I want to make sure that each one of those sections is anywhere from half a centimeter to a centimeter, and I'm gonna need to note down two different sections. For microshading, we have a microblading section at the beginning of the brow and a combination section right after, so you want to make sure you note those down. Here they were about a centimeter approximately for both of them.